With the firing of Mike Brown being very recent, the news and rumors, they are flowing. The news cycle is still well and truly on, and this morning we just got a flood of news and rumors about what's going on with the Kings and what happened with Mike Brown. And so much of this news and so many of these rumors were very contradictory. And I think a lot of the news was contradicting because there were kind of three sides to this whole story. The first side is the Kings organization, the Kings ownership, trying to explain the move, trying to justify the move, trying to look good in the public eye. I think the second side is kind of people that are just trying to create rumors to capitalize on this situation for clicks because it's the Sacramento Kings. You can just say whatever, people will believe you because the Kings do stupid things. So they'll believe anything pretty much. And then the third side is what really happened, the truth. And so, with so much news coming out, I thought I'd jump on here and kind of give my interpretation of what's going on and try to find the truth by reading through the lines and gathering all of the stories and putting it together. So, right off the bat, we had Lou Williams talking about what he's hearing about the situation. And to me, what Lou Williams was saying seems like someone that's trying to capitalize for clicks. He was saying that, Mike Brown, he lost the locker room, and so the front office had to decide between the stars versus the coach. And like Fox was mad at getting called out and singled out by Mike Brown, which Fox shut down on Twitter, said that wasn't true. I don't believe that's true. Fox has been called out all season. He said he loves it. And not just all season, but since Mike Brown got here, Fox's wife has said he wasn't involved in the firing. And I completely believe that because Fox was happy to have Mike Brown here and was happy he got extended. And so Fox shut him down on that, and I believe that. And then there was this whole Mike Brown thought about bringing DeMar off the bench. That's not the craziest idea. But what's crazy to me is acting as if DeMar, who in all three of his stops prior to this in his long career, nobody has ever had a bad thing to say. Everyone said he's a great teammate. Like, if you know DeMar, then he wouldn't do something like this. And so you expect me to believe that the guy who nobody has ever said a bad word about is now all of a sudden, because Mike Brown might bench him, that he's going to go to the front office and be like, hey, like, we need to get rid of this guy. That seems ridiculous to me. Also, the idea of benching DeMar isn't the most ridiculous idea until you look into who would replace him. It's like, wouldn't it just make more sense for Monk to come off the bench, put Keon in there, not put DeMar on the bench and start who? Trey Lyles. And so that part of the story that Mike Brown even ever considered bringing off the bench, I don't even know if that's true. Then we have more reports that seem to come more from the Kings side of things and the ownership side of things. And there was a lot of contradicting in these reports. Because one, they said the roster is fine. Well, newsflash, the roster isn't fine. But they said the roster is fine. And nobody wanted to fire Mike Brown. This report acting like the Kings did everything they could in their power to not fire Mike Brown. Well, guess what? Then you just don't fire Mike Brown if you don't want to fire Mike Brown. There's a report that they tried to trade for Kuzma or Cam Thomas, Brandon Ingram, Zach LaVine, the same names we've heard. And yeah, let's just trade for Cam Thomas, start Fox, Monk, Cam Thomas, DeMar, Sabonis. I'm sure we'll win a ton of games with that lineup. So these guys that just seem like talent upgrades that don't fit a lot that we keep hearing about. Well, then the Kings couldn't get any of those guys, couldn't get a trade done. So then they go and fire the coach. But I thought the roster was fine. Why are you trying to trade for these guys? And so if the roster is then not fine and you're trying to trade for someone, then why do you fire the coach? Then isn't it not the coach's fault? Just so much contradicting here. It's like, makes a lot of sense. Let's just trade for Cam Thomas. Oh, we can't trade for him. Fire Mike Brown. It's like, oh yeah, that sequence of events makes a lot of sense. It's not even the trade deadline yet. Like, what are we doing? Then there were reports that none of the stars, Fox, Sabonis, DeRozan, were consulted on the Mike Brown firing, which I believe. But also, it's kind of crazy that you just fire Mike Brown and then don't consult your players. And Kyle Draper talked about kind of the scene on the plane going to LA when it happened, talking about showing up and how everyone was just on their phones. No one's talking. It's just uncomfortable silence. And to me, that tells me like, no, the players weren't involved, and this is not a team that is happy and hated the coach and wanted him to go and is going to just go about things like normal after he gets fired. Like, this is a team that's kind of in shock and is like, what's happening? And so this whole kind of mess is not necessarily something that's new with the Sacramento Kings organization. We've had our fair share of weird situations with star players, with coaches, and there's one common denominator in all of this, and it's very obvious. And so we have Monte McNair here as a GM who's catching a lot of flack for this. And the Kings even said, like, Monte McNair was the guy that made the decision to fire Mike Brown. It's hard to believe all that, right? When you've gone through now 3 GMs, Monte McNair being the third, and all of these weird things just keep happening and the organization continues to look bad. It's like, man, we must just really suck at hiring front offices. It's like, no, the common denominator is pretty obvious, and that's the ownership. And so that's why it's kind of hard to know how much to blame the front office in Monte McNair for any of this, because when you have an owner who is known to meddle in things and not be the best at it, wanting to play 5-on-4, wanting to draft Nick Stauskas with that video with Pete D'Alessandro when he was the GM. It's like when Vlade was the GM, he caught a lot of flack, and I feel like Vivek was kind of able to hide behind him not being experienced and being a bad GM. And so people would just blame Vivek for hiring him, but not for all the decisions taking place. But now we have an experienced front office. Monte McNair, Wes Wilcox, guys who have been part of NBA front offices for a long time, and yet all this stuff is still happening. So the common denominator is very clear, and it's wild that we still go through these things. It's like at the first sign of adversity, ownership needs to step in and something needs to happen. And when you look at the trade targets that the Kings are rumored with, Kuzma, Cam Thomas, Brandon Ingram, Zach LaVine, it's like these are talent upgrades that don't make a whole lot of sense fit-wise with the current team. And so that sounds like something that an owner who doesn't make the best basketball decisions would want, right? He wants the star power, the name value, rather than a team that comes together and makes sense. Now, that doesn't absolve the front office from any blame. When you look at all the bad moves, when it comes to like drafting guards, Davion Mitchell, Colby Jones, even as your top pick in 2023, drafting another guard in Devin Carter, it's like that's not even necessarily the bad move, but then not trading other guys like Kevin Huerter when he had value. Trading a first-round pick in Rashawn Holmes to get off his money, and then the Mavs are able to flip him for Gafford, and trading a bunch of second-round picks to get off Davion and Sasha's money, and then Sasha getting bought out for nothing. And so it's like all these bad moves, some of it's to get under the luxury tax, which you can blame on ownership, but it's hard to know how much ownership has been involved. But I think it's pretty clear that Vivek is the common denominator in stuff, especially like the firing of Mike Brown, when all of this drama happens and the team becomes a mess. Because the Kings weren't in a good spot in terms of their record, but at least they were together, it seemed like, and the morale wasn't completely shot. And now it just seems like with all the drama, it seems like morale is kind of done. And now it feels like it's going to take a massive move to really turn this around, or you need to go rebuild again, which I don't think ownership wants to do, because I don't think you would have fired the coach and you wouldn't have these rumors of trying to go after these players if you were trying to rebuild. But it's honestly shocking to me that De'Aaron Fox hasn't asked out by this point, because, all these rumors about him possibly he's going to ask out. It's like, I understand it. I understand why people think that, because when you go through like 8 years of this kind of stuff, it's like, man, it's wild that he hasn't asked for a trade yet, but it feels like it might come very soon when you just keep going through things like this. And when an organization keeps going through things like this, it's going to make players and coaches less likely to want to come here. Obviously, it's the NBA and we're an NBA team, so people are going to come here, but it's like you're not going to get the top guys. And when you got DeMar DeRozan, it felt like that was turning around, like someone wants to come here. And then you just completely mess it all up. But it's just a classic Kings scenario, and we've been through this for 3 front offices with this ownership, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change. And so we just have to hope and pray that at some point we luck into getting the best player in the league that just carries us through all of the bad decision making and drama if we ever want to like have actual success. That's what it seems like. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Felt like I just had to talk about all this news that was going on. As always, shout out to the members of this channel for the support in No Rain and Joe Mama. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.